There is a price for everything in this world. For dignity, for respect, for a place at the table. For 8 years I paid that price in secret, with every dollar of my pension, every sleepless night of worry, every piece of my soul I chipped away to keep their perfect world spinning. The final bill came to $128,457.63. But the currency wasn't just money. It was my silence, and on my daughter's wedding day, they spent the very last of it. I am Helen. I am 60 years old. For 8 years, I was the hidden scaffold holding up a palace of lies. I was the ghost in the machinery of their luxury, the silent signatory on their debts, the forgotten architect of a life that excluded me. They saw a kindly, fading woman, grateful for crumbs of attention. What they didn't see was the ledger I was keeping in the quiet of my mind, a tally of every slight, every loan, every broken promise. And they found out on the day my own flesh and blood, my 8-year-old grandson, was weaponized against me. He looked me dead in the eye, with a smile coached by his father, and poured a glass of $200 Cabernet Sauvignon over the dress that represented my last shred of hope, while my son-in-law Lucas laughed until he wept with joy. That was the moment the patient, forgiving mother and grandmother, was publicly executed. And from her ashes rose someone they never knew existed. Someone with a spine of steel, a heart of ice, and a plan to take back every single thing they owed me, with interest. Have you ever been truly seen? Or have you been looked through, as if you were made of glass? And have you ever been treated as a convenience, a utility, a human ATM, whose feelings are an inconvenient glitch in the system? Have you ever sat in a room full of people who share your blood and felt a loneliness so profound it feels like a physical vacuum in your chest? If you know that feeling, that cold, quiet fury that simmers when you're treated as less than, then you are not alone. You are in the right place. This is not a story of a simple revenge. This is a story of reclamation. It's about the atomic power of a quiet woman who finally decides to stop asking for respect and instead, legally and methodically, seizes it back. If you're ready for a story that will make your heart pound with recognition and leave you feeling utterly vindicated, then hit that like button, subscribe to Ultimate Revenge, and let me tell you how I went from being the family's forgotten foundation to the architect of their financial and emotional ruin. To understand the depth of the revenge, you must first understand the economy I was trapped in. It wasn't the economy of money, not really. It was the economy of gratitude. In this twisted system, my currency was sacrifice, and their payment was condescension. My daughter, Amelia, married Lucas Croft 8 years ago. The Crofts weren't just wealthy, they were a different species. Their money was old, quiet, and woven into the very fabric of their being. My late husband, Frank, and I, we were high school teachers. Our fortune was measured in the success of our students, the love in our home, the well-worn copies of To Kill a Mockingbird on our shelves. To Lucas, we were a charming relic, a souvenir from Amelia's humble past. The financial bleed began as a trickle, a temporary cash flow issue that required a $5,000 loan. Just for 60 days, Helen. I'll pay you back with interest. His voice was so reasonable, so confident. The 60 days bled into 6 months. When I gently mentioned it, his tone frosted over. Helen, I'm building an empire here. I thought you believed in family. This nickel and diming is beneath us. Nickel and diming. The phrase was a masterstroke. It made my survival seem petty. It made his greed seem grand. So I swallowed my anxiety and stayed silent. Then it was $15,000 for a can't-miss investment. Then $25,000 when his Porsche unexpectedly needed a new transmission. A story I later discovered was a lie to cover a losing bet at the racetrack. The promises of repayment were always vague, always accompanied by a weary sigh about the immense pressure of managing real wealth. The anchor that would nearly pull me under was the Oak Hill Estates mansion, a monstrously beautiful colonial with a pool and a 3-car garage. Their forever home. Mom, Amelia said, her voice a perfect instrument of manipulation. The bank is being difficult. Our assets are complex, tied up in investments. We just need your name on the mortgage as a co-signer. It's a formality. With your teacher's pension, you're the perfect candidate. You won't have to pay a thing. It's just your signature we need. I was already $50,000 deep in loans that had vanished. Saying no felt like pulling the rug out from under my own daughter for my grandson, so I signed. In a blur of legal jargon I didn't understand, I put my name on a $1.09 million mortgage for a house I was never given a key to. A house that, to this day, I have never seen the inside of beyond the foyer. And I paid. Oh, how I paid. The first time they were a little short, the bank didn't call them. They called me. The payment was $9,500. I covered it from the meager savings I'd set aside for a new roof, my stomach churning with a familiar acidic fear. It became a ritual. My phone would ring. It was never Lucas. It was always Amelia. Mom, things are just so tight right now. Lucas is waiting on a huge commission. If we could just borrow $8,000 for the mortgage this month, the word borrow was a fiction. We all knew it. It was a toll I had to pay for the privilege of occasional strained access to my family. So I worked. By day, I was the head librarian at Jefferson High, guiding teenagers through the worlds of Shakespeare and Singer. By night, I was a freelance bookkeeper for 3 small businesses, my eyes straining at spreadsheets until midnight, my back aching from the cheap office chair. I'd come home at 11 p.m., the silence of my apartment echoing the silence of my own life, all to keep their golden world afloat. And the payment in the economy of gratitude? I was an afterthought, an obligation. One Christmas, I spent weeks knitting a complex cable knit blanket for Liam, using the softest, most expensive merino wool I could find. I poured every ounce of my love into those stitches. Months later, I saw it in their dog's bed, chewed and matted. Oh, Barnaby just claimed it the moment he saw it, Amelia said with a dismissive wave. We couldn't say no to that face. When I offered to help plan Liam's 7th birthday party, a superhero training camp, I was gently rebuffed. Don't trouble yourself, Mom. We have a professional event planner. It's just easier. I was the human ATM, and they were careful to only use me when no one was looking, ensuring I never stained the pristine image of their self-made success. Until the wedding. Until they decided that my greatest humiliation would be their finest entertainment. The wedding was to be my coronation. A single day where I could stand beside my daughter as an equal, as her mother, and be seen. I bought a cream-colored silk dress. It was simple, elegant, the most beautiful thing I had owned since my own wedding dress. It cost $748.32. I put the final payment on a credit card I couldn't afford to pay off. A final, desperate act of hope. Maybe today the armor will hold. Maybe today I will belong. From the moment I arrived at the venue, a grand, historic estate that felt like a museum I wasn't allowed to touch, I was put in my place. A young woman with a headset and a clipboard gave me a once-over. You must be the maternal grandmother, she asked, her tone suggesting I was a caterer who'd arrived at the wrong entrance. I'm the mother of the bride, I said, my voice betraying me by cracking slightly. Right, of course, your prep room is down here. She led me not to a bridal suite, but to a converted linen closet next to the industrial kitchen. The constant, low hum of the walk-in refrigerators was my wedding day orchestra. Amelia floated in an hour later, a vision in ivory silk and lace. Oh, Mom, she said, giving me a brief air, kiss that didn't touch my cheek. She didn't even glance at my dress. Her eyes were already scanning the room for Lucas, her beacon. Just try to stay out of the coordinator's way, okay? It's all a bit of a military operation. Stay out of the way, the 3-word epitaph of my relationship with my daughter. The ceremony was a flawlessly choreographed performance. When I walked down the aisle alone, I felt the weight of 1,000 eyes. Not admiration, but a pitying curiosity. That's the mother. She looked so ordinary. I took my seat in the front row, a place of honor that felt like the defendant's chair. The reception was a masterclass in my own erasure. My place card was at table 12, strategically positioned behind a towering floral arrangement that completely blocked my view of the head table. I was seated with Lucas's ancient, mostly deaf great Aunt Muriel and a couple who, I soon gathered from their terse whispers, were on the brink of divorce. Lucas's father, Charles, gave a speech. He was a man carved from granite and old money. To my son Lucas and his beautiful bride Amelia, he boomed, his voice filling the ballroom without effort. Welcome to the family, my dear. You've always been the daughter we never had. T. The subtext was a sledgehammer to my sternum. You have been upgraded. Your past, including the woman who gave you life, has been rendered obsolete. Then came the father-daughter dance. Charles Croft, with his patrician bearing, swept my daughter across the floor. The room watched them mesmerized. I saw Amelia's face alight with a radiant, triumphant joy. She was finally home. She belonged to them, not to me. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was heavy, proprietary. Lucas stood there, holding a glass of deep blood-red wine. His smile was a scalpel. "Helen," he said, his voice oozing a false warmth, "you look comfortable." The insult was exquisitely tailored. It wasn't that I looked bad. I just didn't look like I belonged in this room, at this event in this family. He then leaned down, his mouth close to the ear of my 8-year-old grandson, Liam, who was clinging to his side like a miniature acolyte. He pointed a finger, straight at me, and I saw it. I saw the moment my sweet Liam's face shifted. The innocent light in his eyes was snuffed out, replaced by a mischievous, rehearsed glint that was not his own. Liam took the heavy crystal glass from his father's hand. My heart, that foolish, hopeful organ, gave a traitorous leap. He's coming to give me a hug. He remembers his grams. He walked straight towards me, his small, deliberate steps echoing in a sudden pocket of silence that had fallen around our table. He stopped directly in front of me, his face a perfect porcelain mask of childish innocence. "Grandma," he said, his voice ringing out, clear and piercing. "Daddy says you're a what was the word?" He tapped his chin, a little actor hitting his mark. "Oh yeah, a leech. He says you're always sucking up our money, and you have." He scrunched his nose. Cheap taste. The words didn't just land. They embedded themselves in my skin, each one a shard of glass. I felt the air leave my lungs in a silent, painful rush. "But this wine," he chirped, raising the glass, a cruel, practiced smile playing on his lips, "is very expensive. So now you'll match." He didn't trip. He didn't stumble. It was not an accident. It was an execution. With a deliberate theatrical flick of his wrist, he threw the entire glass of Cabernet Sauvignon directly onto my chest. The shock was physical, a cold, wet slap that stole my breath. The rich, cloying smell of expensive oak and dark fruit immediately filled my nostrils, a scent I would forever associate with betrayal. The dark red stain spread across the pale cream silk like a Rorschach test of their contempt, grotesque and undeniable. Silence. A profound, ringing silence that lasted 1, 2, 3 heartbeats. Then Lucas, he didn't just laugh, he howled. He doubled over, slapping his knee, actual tears of mirth streaming down his face. Oh my God. The kid is a legend, a legend. He gets it from me. It was the cue the entire room had been waiting for. The ballroom erupted, not in gasps of horror, but in peals of laughter, pointing fingers. Smirks behind hands. I was the evening's entertainment, the court jester, the family clown they had finally, publicly pelted with rotten fruit. I looked at Amelia, my daughter, my own flesh and blood. Her hand flew to her mouth, but she wasn't looking at me with pity or horror. She was looking at me with pure, unadulterated embarrassment. She was ashamed that I, her stained, humiliated mother, was causing a scene, ruining her perfect day. In that moment, something fundamental broke, not my heart, that had been fracturing for years. It was the cage of my own making. The door didn't just swing open, it disintegrated. I stood up. The heavy wine-soaked silk pulled at me, cold and suffocating. I didn't run. I walked. Each step was an agony of sound. The squelch of wine in my shoes, the rustle of ruined fabric, the pounding of my own blood in my ears. I walked through a gauntlet of their laughter, their faces a blur of mockery and glee. I didn't look back. I walked out of the ballroom, out of the hotel, and into the vast, cleansing, and indifferent silence of the night. If your heart is pounding with that cold, familiar fury, if your stomach is clenched in a knot of shared humiliation, type "I see you" in the comments. Let me know you're here. Let me know you understand that this isn't about spilled wine. This is about spilled dignity. And tell me where you're listening from. That night, in the profound silence of my apartment, I expected the dam to break. I expected to cry, to scream, to collapse into the heap of broken pieces I felt myself to be. But nothing came. There was only a vast, empty calm. And in the center of that calm, a single crystalline thought. I have been paying for this. Literally. I drove home on autopilot, the smell of the wine still clinging to me, a pungent ghost in my car. I walked into my apartment. The one I'd nearly lost twice covering their emergencies, and I didn't break down. I performed a ritual. I took off the dress. I didn't rip it or ball it up in a fit of rage. I treated it with a strange surgical reverence. I unzipped it, stepped out of it, and carefully placed it inside a clear, heavy-duty garment bag. I zipped it shut and hung it on the back of my closet door. It was no longer a dress. It was a monument, a headstone for the woman I had been, the woman who believed that love could be bought with sacrifice. Then I made a pot of coffee, black and strong enough to strip paint. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Frank and I had graded countless papers and dreamed of a retirement traveling the world, a dream his early death stole from us. I opened the fireproof safe where I kept my important documents. I laid them out one by one on the worn wood. They weren't just papers. They were chapters in the biography of my exploitation. The bank transfer slip for $15,000 for Lucas's business development course at a dubious-sounding institute I later discovered was a weekend seminar in the Bahamas. The $28,000 check for the down payment on Liam's private school, because the local public school, the one Frank and I had dedicated our lives to, wasn't good enough for a Croft. The $42,000 in bridge loans that had vanished into the black hole of their lifestyle, documented in a series of increasingly desperate emails from me and vague, dismissive replies from Lucas, and the big one, the mortgage, the thick stack of documents for the $1. $9 million co-signature for the house in Oak Hill Estates. The house I was never given a key to. The house where they had hosted a family-only kitchen inauguration party. A party celebrating the renovation I had paid for, to which I, the co-signer, was explicitly not invited. I got out my calculator. I am a librarian and a bookkeeper. Numbers do not lie. I entered every figure, every cent, with the cold, detached precision of an auditor. The tally on the small digital screen glowed in the dim light. $128,457.63. I looked at the number, and then I lifted my eyes to the garment bag on the closet door, the dark stain looking like a black hole in the pristine fabric. The public humiliation of the wedding wasn't the cause of my rage. It was the final, irrefutable symptom. It was the biopsy that confirmed the disease I had been denying for years. I was not family. I was a resource, a convenience, a fool whose love and money were interchangeable and equally disposable. The meek, desperate to please Helen, the woman who confused being needed with being valued, died in that ballroom. The woman who rose from the ashes of that silk dress was forged from colder, harder stuff. She was made of ledger books and legal precedent, of quiet patience and a will of titanium. My plan did not erupt in a fireball of hot rage. It coalesced in the vacuum of that silence, fully formed, as if it had been waiting in the wings of my mind for its cue. Phase 1, the guillotine. I would formally and irrevocably withdraw my name from the mortgage. I knew, with the certainty of a mathematician, that they could not qualify on their own. Lucas's entire empire was a beautifully decorated Potemkin village, and I was about to set it on fire. Phase 2, the clawback. I would call in every single cent of the $128,457.63, and I would demand the full contractual interest they had blithely agreed to and never intended to pay, bringing the total to over $140,000. This would not be a request. It would be a formal legal demand. Phase 3, the siege. I would become a black hole. No explanations, no arguments, no emotional responses. I would let the cold, hard, impersonal institutions I was about to unleash, the banks, the lawyers, the courts, do my talking for me. Their panic would be my symphony. Their downfall my masterpiece. The next morning I put on my armor, a simple, severe black suit I hadn't worn since Frank's funeral. I looked in the mirror and saw a widow, and in a way I was. I was mourning the family I thought I had. I walked into the offices of Carson and Reed, my posture straight, my breathing even. My lawyer, Diana Reed, was a woman whose reputation preceded her like a warning shot. Brilliant, ruthless, and possessing a particular genius for dismantling powerful, arrogant men who underestimated her. Her office was a minimalist sanctuary of power. Clean lines, cool light, no personal photographs. I did not cry. I did not plead. I was not a victim seeking solace. I was a client presenting a case. These are the facts, I said, my voice flat and steady, devoid of all emotion. I slid the folders across the polished glass desk one by one. This is the financial timeline of my exploitation. This is the mortgage I was socially and emotionally coerced into co-signing. I saved the last piece for the finale. I opened the photo on my phone and turned the screen toward her. And this is the catalyst, the calculated public humiliation that proves the exploitative nature of our entire relationship. Diana Rett looked from the meticulously organized documents to the stark image of the stained dress. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, didn't soften with pity. They hardened into glittering diamonds. She saw the story, not just the facts. "Helen," she said, her voice low and as sharp as a drawn blade, "this is one of the most egregious, clear-cut cases of elder financial and emotional abuse I have ever had the displeasure of witnessing. They didn't just take your money. They systematically dismantled your self-worth to get it. They treated you not as a person, but as a financial instrument. We are not just going to win this case. We are going to salt the earth they walk on so nothing ever grows there again." The letters went out that afternoon. They were not threats. They were obituaries for their old life. A formal, notarized demand for the full repayment of $142,000. A separate, irrevocable notification to the bank, citing my legal rights as a cosigner, that I was immediately withdrawing my guarantee from the Oak Hill Estate's mortgage. The silence that followed was the most powerful sound I had ever heard. It was the silence of the universe holding its breath. I had launched a nuclear missile directly into the heart of their perfect world. Now, I sat back in the quiet of my home and I waited for the shockwave. It came at 6:03 a.m. 2 days later. My phone screamed to life, shattering the dawn's peace. It was Amelia. The hysteria in her voice was a weapon she had wielded against me for years, and it had always worked. "Mom, what the hell is this? A lawyer's letter? The bank is calling us. They're saying we have to pay back the entire mortgage or they'll foreclose. You're going to make us homeless. Are you insane?" Over some spilled wine, I took a slow, calm breath, visualizing the stain on the silk, the laughter, the look in her eyes. "It wasn't spilled, Amelia," I said, my voice dangerously, unnervingly quiet. "It was thrown, and it wasn't about the wine. It was about the 8 years that came before it. Goodbye." Click! 30 seconds later, the phone rang again. Lucas. The charming, polished facade was gone, stripped away to reveal the snarling, cornered animal beneath. "You psychotic old bitch." His voice was a guttural snarl, barely recognizable. "You have just signed your own death warrant. You think your little lawyer scares me? I will bury you. I will drag your name through the mud so deep you'll never ever get it clean. You will be a laughingstock. Fix this." "I already have," I whispered and ended the call. I then turned my phone to silent. The siege had begun. They tried emotional warfare first, their most potent weapon. They sent Liam, my baby. I found him on my doorstep an hour later, his little face a mess of tears, his whole body shaking with sobs he couldn't control. "Grandma, please," he wailed, throwing his arms around my legs. "Please, Daddy is so mad. He's breaking things. He says we have to live in a tiny, smelly apartment and I have to leave my school and all my friends. Don't you love me anymore? Please don't make us poor. I'm scared." The psychological warfare was exquisite, a masterstroke of cruelty designed to shatter my resolve by attacking my most vulnerable point, my unconditional love for him. I felt my own tears threaten, a hot pressure behind my eyes. I knelt down, holding his small, trembling face in my hands, my heart a battlefield where love and fury were locked in a death match. "Liam," I said, my voice thick but steady, "I love you. I love you more than all the stars in the sky, my sweet boy. Nothing, and I mean nothing, will ever change that. But what your father did was wrong. What your mother allowed was wrong. And when people do wrong things, there have to be consequences. If there aren't, they never learn, and they just keep hurting people." I wiped his tears, gave him a tight hug, and sent him home with his favorite chocolate bar, my own soul feeling flayed open. When sentiment failed, they escalated to intimidation. My car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic, was keyed, the word greedy carved deep into the driver's side door. My apartment door was splattered with rotten eggs that baked in the sun. My inbox was flooded with anonymous emails from fake accounts. "Die alone, you miserable hag." You're a stain on this family." The irony of that last one was not lost on me, but I was no longer a vulnerable woman. I was a fortress. Diana secured an immediate restraining order. I installed a small, discreet security camera at my front door. Every act of vandalism, every threatening message was no longer an attack. It was evidence. They were showing their true faces to the world, and I was meticulously collecting the proof, building a wall between their old life of privilege and their new reality of consequences. Their final, desperate move was a lawsuit, a preemptive strike. They sued me for intentional infliction of emotional distress and undue influence, painting a picture for the court of a loving, generous son-in-law and daughter and a confused, vindictive, mentally unstable old woman who was destroying her family out of sheer, irrational spite. It was the greatest miscalculation of their lives. The courtroom was their chosen stage, but they never understood that Diana was the director, and I was the star witness who would deliver the closing argument with my life. Their lawyer, a smarmy man in a suit that cost more than my monthly bookkeeping income, oozed condescension. He painted a picture of a fragile family unit being torn apart by a bitter matriarch. "Ms. Grayson," he said, oozing false sympathy, "isn't it true that this entire destructive legal campaign is rooted in simple spite, that your feelings were hurt at a party, and you've decided to take it out on your own flesh and blood?" I looked directly at him, then let my gaze sweep over the jury, my voice clear and resonant, filling the silent wood-paneled room. Spite," I said, "is a small, petty, and ultimately impotent emotion. What I feel is not spite, it is justice. For 8 years, I was treated as if my love was a blank check and my self-respect was an optional extra. The party you so dismissively refer to was not the cause of this action. It was the final public confirmation of a disease that had been festering for nearly a decade. It was the day I decided to stop signing the checks." He sneered, thinking he had me. "So you admit, under oath, that you are financially punishing your own daughter and grandson for a childish prank?" I turned slowly in my seat and looked directly at Lucas and Amelia. My gaze was a laser, and I saw Lucas flinch. Amelia dropped her eyes. "I am not punishing them," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. "I am finally holding them accountable. A childish prank is putting a frog in someone's pocket. What happened was a premeditated act of psychological violence, carefully orchestrated by an adult man and performed by a manipulated child. It was designed to remind me, in front of hundreds of people, of my place. And my place," I said, turning back to the jury, "is no longer at the bottom of their shoe." Diana Reed was an artist, and the courtroom was her canvas. She displayed a digital timeline on a giant screen for the jury, a horrifying visual representation of my financial bleeding. Each loan, each mortgage payment I covered, lit up in a glaring, accusatory red. The number at the bottom grew and grew, a shocking testament to their greed. She then entered the physical evidence. "Your Honor, we submit this into evidence as Exhibit A." It was the clear garment bag with the wine-stained dress. She held it up. "This is the $748 dress, destroyed not in an accident, but in a calculated public humiliation. This was the final straw after years of private financial ones." She called a forensic accountant to the stand, who laid bare the rotten core of Lucas's finances, the massive hidden consumer debt, the lies on their original loan applications, the money trail that led directly from my life insurance payout into the lease for his BMW. The judge, a stern, no-nonsense woman who had undoubtedly seen every trick in the book, listened to it all with a face of granite. When it was over, her gavel came down like a clap of thunder. She dismissed their lawsuit with prejudice, meaning they could never file it again. She sanctioned them for bringing a frivolous and predatory case. She ordered them to pay every single cent of my legal fees, and she issued a permanent restraining order prohibiting them from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my home or workplace. The sound of that gavel was more than a verdict. It was the sound of my emancipation. It was the key turning in the lock of a cage I had lived in for 8 long years. The fallout was swift, absolute, and played out in the society pages with a gleeful schadenfreude. The bank foreclosed on the Oak Hill Estates mansion. It was sold at a significant loss in a fire sale. Lucas's business, which was entirely dependent on the perception of wealth and stability, collapsed like a house of cards. The same pages that had once chronicled their lavish wedding and charity galas now ran a small, vicious piece about their spectacular fall from grace and financial mismanagement. They moved into a small, cramped, two-bedroom apartment in a building with thin walls and noisy neighbors. The illusion was shattered. The golden life was over. And I did not just survive, I bloomed. With the returned money, every last cent of the $142,000 was recovered, and the immense, suffocating weight of their multi-million-dollar debt lifted from my shoulders. I did something for myself. I bought the old Page, a struggling, dusty, but beloved neighborhood bookstore. I renamed it The Final Chapter. It is my sanctuary, my kingdom, my legacy. The smell of old paper and binding glue is my incense. The soft rustle of pages turning is my music. Here I am not an afterthought. I am the main character. I host a book club for seniors where we argue passionately about fiction. I hold a story time for children where I do all the voices. My regular customers are my chosen family. They see me. They listen to my recommendations. They thank me. It is a simple, honest, profoundly fulfilling life. Built with my own two hands and my own sound mind, not funded by my own desperate self-sacrifice. About a year after the trial, the bell above the shop door chimed, and Amelia walked in. She was alone. The designer armor was gone, replaced by simple, off-the-rack jeans and a sweater. The entitled, frantic glint in her eye was extinguished, replaced by a weary, profound, and genuine sadness. She had finally seen the man she married for what he was. We sat in the two worn, comfortable armchairs in the poetry section. She cried. Not the performative tears of before, but deep, shuddering sobs of true remorse. She told me she had left Lucas. The fairy tale had been a gilded nightmare. Mom, she whispered, her voice raw, I am so sorry. For the wedding, for the wine, for the years, for everything. I was blind. I was so desperate to belong in that world, to be a Croft, that I forgot who I was. I forgot who you were. I forgot what real love looks like. Forgiveness is a path, not a destination. It is a long road paved with broken glass. We are walking it, side by side, one careful, quiet, honest conversation at a time. It is fragile, and it is painful, but for the first time, it is real. It is built on a foundation of truth, not on the shifting sands of financial transactions and social climbing. Liam visits me often now in my sunny apartment above the bookshop. We read the Narnia books together, just like I did with his mother. We talk about his new school, his new friends. The manipulated, rehearsed glint is gone from his eyes, replaced by the genuine, curious light of a boy who is finally allowed to just be a boy, free from the toxic pressures of his father's world. The humiliation they orchestrated with such glee was meant to be my end. They thought the stain would define me forever as the lesser, the charity case, the one who didn't belong. They were wrong. The stain didn't define me. It refined me. It was the fire that burned away everything I didn't need. The fear, the desperation, the pathetic need for their approval, and left only my unshakable titanium core. They thought they were laughing at me. But now, my life is a quiet, powerful, and deeply satisfying masterpiece of peace and purpose. The world they tried so hard to push me out of was a gilded cage. The world I built for myself with my own courage and resolve is one of boundless, beautiful freedom. I am Helen. I am 60 years old. I am a business owner, a grandmother, a survivor, and an author. Not of books, but of my own destiny. And the final chapter, I wrote it myself. If this story of quiet strength and devastatingly satisfying justice resonated with you, if it made you feel seen and vindicated, then do me a favor. Hit that like button. Let me know the revenge was as sweet for you as it was for me. Subscribe to Ultimate Revenge, because every underdog deserves an audience, and your support tells these stories that they need to be told. And ring the notification bell so you never miss a story where the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, finally rise up and reclaim their power. I'm Helen. This was my story. Now I want to hear from you.